It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. But like a miniature Buddha, covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah, I stabbed a man in the heart.
I saw that. Brick killed a guy. Did you throw a trident?
Yeah, there were horses and a man on fire, and I killed a guy with a trident.
Brick, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. You should find yourself a safe house or a relative close by. Lay low for a while, because you're probably wanted for murder. I'm proud of you fellas. You all kept your head on a swivel, and that's what you gotta do when you find yourself in a vicious cockfight.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, and I am the Guru. This is a special edition of the Golf Guru Show, as my good friend from Denmark, Andreas is hijacking the podcast and is going to be your host for today, as he reached out to me recently and said, hey, loving the podcast, but we want to know more about the Guru. So he had the idea of interviewing me as the guest and using some of my questions that I always ask my guests. So hopefully you enjoy this. I thought Andreas did a fantastic job hosting and asking the questions. Andreas has been a former guest on the show. If you want to check out his fabulous interview, go back to episode 25 because he is just an outstanding junior coach. So make sure you check out that episode if you haven't already. So without further ado, I give you the Guru as the guest on the Golf Guru Show. Enjoy.
So welcome to the Golf Guru podcast. Today is a special episode because we have changed the roles in the podcast. So your normal host, Jason, is actually going to be the guest. And I will be hosting this as well as I possibly can. This will be my podcast debut as an interviewer. So if we welcome Jason Sutton, a quick resume of Jason is that he is currently a Golf Magazine top 100 instructor. And he's also currently the number one ranked golf coach in the state of North Carolina by Golf Digest. So that's already quite a resume, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Andreas.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
On my own show. It's great to be a guest on my own show.
Yeah. So, all right. So the quick background on this is that I'm a big fan of your podcast. I love listening to it when I'm driving around or I'm in the range picker or something like that.
Thank you.
And I figured a lot of times we don't really hear you. We hear your guests, but me knowing you, I know that you have one of the bigger networks in the golf industry. You know most, if not all, of the smart guys, or at least the guys I think are smart. And I figured it'd be cool to listen to how your background was like. So if we go to, before we really get into it, try to take us back to basically the beginning, maybe even before you started coaching, and give your listeners a little bit of background on how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, just outside of Charleston, West Virginia, a town called St. Albans, and pretty normal childhood. Played a lot of sports other than golf, really. Starting out, I was fortunate to grow up with a really good group of kids, even in a small town. Baseball was my first love, and played basketball at a fairly high level in high school as well. And baseball, the group of kids that I was with and grew up with, we won 3 state championships by the time we were 15. So we got to do a lot of traveling in baseball, which, I sort of stumbled into golf really because golf was, definitely not my first love. And it wasn't big in that small town. Junior golf wasn't very big. I didn't know any golfers. My parents didn't play. I didn't have really any influences. So there was only one kid on the team, a kid named Paul Szymanski, that played golf. So he invited me out to play golf or really ride around the golf cart just to kind of see what it was all about. And I was intrigued. I was curious. And I was about 11, 12 years old at this time. We were really, kind of in the off season in baseball. And I was like, kind of bored and thought, well, check this thing out. And I was hooked. And I just grabbed an old set of clubs out of my dad's garage. And they weren't even nice clubs. And I started hitting wiffle balls around in the yard. And I was like, man, this is cool. I can kind of make the ball curve around and hit shots in the yard. And I didn't even hit a real golf ball for like 6 months. I didn't know where the golf course was, much less know how to play golf. So finally, after hitting the balls around and playing like imaginary golf holes, I went out to the course. I'll never forget, I shot like 54 or 55 the first time I teed it up with a real golf ball. So I knew I was reasonably skilled. I was a good athlete. Playing other sports, hand-eye coordination was pretty good, and it just kind of blossomed from there. So I started playing junior golf right after that. As many tournaments as I could play. My parents just kind of took me around all over the East Coast, really playing junior golf, and didn't know if I was going to play baseball in college or golf, and just got an opportunity to play at an NAIA school here in West Virginia. I had a couple of like partial offers to like Coastal Carolina and App State, but I decided to stay closer to home where I knew I could play golf and I could go in as a freshman and play. And it was a really good decision. I had a great 4 years at a school called Glenville State. We actually were nationally ranked. My junior year, we finished second in the nation in NAIA. Had some really good teammates from all over the world, had some Irish kids, some Canadian kids. My roommate was a guy named Bob Sowards, that most people out there, club professionals, is one of the best club professionals in the country, and just won senior player of the year, I think, for for the PGA. So still plays at a high level, played on tour. So I just grew up around a bunch of really good players. Even in college at a small school, you kind of run into people like that, which is amazing. So after I got out of college, I said, well, I'm going to turn pro. I didn't know if I really wanted to play, or I just knew I wanted to be around the golf business because as I was, coming up through college and even high school, all I did was work at the golf courses. I would either go pick range balls or I'd be a cart attendant, and worked up into the shop at a couple clubs. So I knew I wanted to be around golf. I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do back in those days, in the early 90s, mid-90s. So luckily got on to an assistant pro job at Sleepy Hollow Golf Club and started teaching and just doing the club pro thing. And I worked at a couple clubs in West Virginia. Actually ended up going back to another club called Berry Hills, where I originally started when I was a college kid, picking range balls and working in the shop, which was kind of cool. Got my Class A membership for the PGA, passed my PAT on the first try, and I was off and running. So I figured if I was going to stay in the golf business, that I needed to get into an area where there was more opportunity. Where I was, most of the pros are going to be there forever. Really didn't have a chance to sort of work up through the ranks and to be a head professional, which is kind of the goal when you first get into PGA back then. It was, you're going to be an assistant, you're going to be a head pro or a GM or something like that, director of golf. So I was heading that direction, really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, I need to get into a bigger section. And I love the Carolinas. I had some family down here. My sister-in-law lived in Charlotte. We used to come down and visit. I'm like, man, this place is really cool. There's a lot to do. A lot of sports opportunities. A lot of golf courses were opening up. So I got very fortunate to get on to an assistant's job at the Northstone Club. And it was a brand new club there in Charlotte. Was there 1 year, and the head pro actually ended up leaving. And the GM, for some reason, took a liking to this 27-year-old kid that knew nothing about being a head professional. And I got that opportunity very early on to have a head pro job at an early age, and a big job at the time. It felt really, really big. So I was there for a couple years, and then had some management changes. I went through like a couple GMs that we can talk about later on, as far as failures that ended up to be some of the best things that happened to me. But I ended up leaving there and starting to teach full time at the Dana Rader Golf School, formerly the Dana Rader Golf School, which was there in Charlotte under what kind of started as my first golf teaching mentor, Dana Rader. And I was there for like 12 years and started to build my reputation, started to really get into teaching and coaching. And then that led me to the opportunity that I am now, which I've been the director of instruction at Carmel Country Club here in Charlotte. It's a high-end private facility that's just amazing. This will be my 7th year, believe it or not. Time flies when you're having fun, but that's sort of the comic strip version of my career as it stands right now. And I've had a lot of luck and a lot of success, and I love doing what I do every day. Now, my 26th or 27th year coaching, I love it more now than I did when I first started.
So to the people listening, I just want to add that I think Carmel Country Club might be the sweetest golf club I've ever been to. I thought it was absolutely an unreal facility you have there.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
What do you think? So like 26 or 27 years teaching, that's a long time teaching or doing basically the same thing. It might be in new locations, but you're still teaching golf. And I don't know how it is in America, but where I'm from, it seems like a lot of coaches, no matter how ambitious they are, and no matter how well educated they are, it seems like we're in a business where there's actually quite a bit of burnout. So coaches get bored, they stop developing, they start just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Days turns into the same days. But how do you manage with, like, after 26 years or 27 years of teaching golf, how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think in our business, you either love it or you don't. You know, I mean, the guys that don't love it, the guys that don't have that passion, are going to get burnt out because, like you said, if you don't enjoy going to work, then that's just no way to live. And I just haven't found that to be the case for me. I mean, I think probably because I'm just so driven and I'm so afraid of getting stale that I'm always trying to push myself to be better, and I'm always trying to push myself to learn new things and to meet new people and to surround myself with, you know, I love getting around the younger generation now, like the guys that work for me now, and then the relationships that I've built over the years, because it keeps you excited about the direction that our industry's going. And if you're not excited about that, then I think you're in the wrong business. And I just love people. I think that's the thing. That's the thing for me is, you know, you always get that question when you do interviews. It's like, why do you love doing what you do? It's just the people that I get to meet and the people that I get to share experiences with, like my club members, or, you know, the people that I get to meet when I go travel and do workshops or go do education and do seminars. That's what's exciting to me. And like I said, I think if it feels forced, then you're probably either not in the right place or not around the right people, or you're just in the wrong business. Yeah,
it all sounds relatable to me. And I think, my opinion, I think one of the, of course, I mean, you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people who are willing to spend their money to see you. So, I mean, you have to be a people person, but I also think the continual development is one of the most important things, not only as a coach, but just as a person. So yes. Things don't get stale, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm just grateful every day that people want to come see me and want to come spend time with me. And, you know, I try to never take that for granted. You know, if the moment you start doing that or you get that mindset, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. Have you ever been motivated by the fear of failure instead of developing? As in, like, I can't, like, I'm actually getting better so I don't screw people up as much as it's the other way around?
Yeah, I think every day. I mean, I think that's what keeps me going. It's kind of weird because I know 10 years ago I was looking at people that, that I admired and said, man, it's not about accolades. It's not even about that. It's, we all set goals and we want to be, whatever, top 100, or you want to do this or that. And it's like the more success or the more accolades that I got, the more I felt like I needed to kind of validate myself, right? It's like I want to keep moving forward because I want to make sure that I stay ahead of the curve. I want to make sure that I stay ahead of my former self, really, because I think that's all that we're battling against. I'm not worried so much about everybody else. I'm just worried about me and not falling behind in where I think I need to be. So my goal every year is, when I sit down and do my goals, is like, I want to be better than I was last year. I want to learn something different than I did last year. I want to evolve into a better version of myself. So yeah, every day I think failure pushes me. I want to try to keep myself uncomfortable, I guess is a better way to describe it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but maybe have the students have more comfortable lessons still, where they get better the easiest way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's our job. It's making you got to love the lessons that you give, when all the stuff that, and I always tell the young coaches, when you go watch a top teacher teach and he's not saying much, there's a lot going on in our heads. We're just trying to figure out what we're going to say, how we're going to deliver that information to get the student to change or to get it the quickest. And when you make that decision and it happens and the student says, wow, this was a lot easier than I thought, that's what it's all about, right? It's kind of that moment where you're like, okay, I did a great job, and it wasn't super complicated, even though maybe it was behind the scenes, but we got that student, we achieved the goal of that day, and we're moving in that direction to where the student has hope of changing or getting better, or, enjoying the game a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, and how do you think you learned how to, let's just say the right things the right way at the right time?
Wow. I mean, it just loads of experience. I mean, tons of doing it wrong. I think
loads of failure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about that. I mean, I always tell the young coaches is, don't be afraid to say the wrong thing. Just pay attention, right? If it doesn't work, or you always, I think self-reflection is a big deal, on the daily, that you kind of look back at your lessons and say, okay, maybe I should have done this differently. Maybe I should have done this differently. It's just tons and tons of time spent with people and trying different things out and learning what works, what doesn't work in certain situations. That's a tough question because there's no perfect formula. It's just, again, it's just being observant enough and having, an ego that's not overpowering the fact that you think that, even when you start knowing stuff, that everything, and that your message has to be correct, because a lot of times it might be the right information, but to the wrong person, or it might be the right information at the wrong time.
Yeah,
right?
in the wrong order.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
So it's all of that. So it's, it's so much, there's a lot of trial and error involved in great coaching, knowing when to say something, know when to be quiet, knowing, what that person's feeling, getting the right feedback from that person, reading their body language. It's just a bunch of little stuff that adds up to, successful coaching. And that's it. It's different for everybody. And that's why successful golf lessons come in many forms, as always I like to say.
Yeah, it makes sense. What are, so going back a little bit, you said you were with the Dana Radar Golf Academy for 12 years, and you basically, I'm guessing she was kind of your mentor for a long time?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that was the first sort of top coach that I've ever worked with and been around for that long a time, right? So, not that I had plenty of mentors over the years, but to spend that much time, as I always joke, and we're still great friends to this day. I always joke that we were basically married for 12 years because I saw her and the staff probably more than I did my own family, as busy as we were.
But what would you say, so if you take a really successful instructor like her and you just look back, what would you say is some of the maybe most important things you took away from learning from her?
Wow.
I bet there's a lot.
Yeah, there is. I mean, we all have different styles and we have different ways that we teach. And also, I think I can sort of think out loud here. I'm a big believer that we meet people and we accept information at the right time in your life, right? So it's like I was, at this point I was 30 years old and I'd been doing some teaching, but it was my first sort of experience of teaching full-time, teaching 10 hours a day, doing golf schools, doing just a ton of golf lessons in a year's time. So she was very instrumental in guiding me through how to properly structure a golf lesson, which I'd never ever heard of. How to really frame one properly. How you start a lesson, how you interview the student, how you deliver the analysis. And then at that point, it was a lot of just training on the job of, I watched her teach a ton, as well as the other instructors that all came through there that they're all really good teachers. So we sort of bounced ideas off of each other. As we always said, iron sharpens iron. Is when you get around a group of teachers for that long, then you start sharing information and we all get better. So I learned a ton about how to market yourself from Dana, how to public speak, which was a big skill that I needed when I first started teaching full time. Going back to sort of my childhood and just growing up, I was very introverted and very shy and backward, quiet kid. Which,
no kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's something that I had to, to really work on being in the golf business. I learned that at an early age when I was assistant pro. I actually had to speak to people and, say hello to members and, and start to build relationships. I had no idea how to do that. Dana was very, very instrumental. And like, she was one of the best presenters that I've ever seen speak. And she had coaching, right? She literally, had a presentation coach I was like, wow, this is pretty important. So, and she forced us to do that stuff. I mean, it was almost like, I remember the first day or one of the first days I was there at the golf school, we were alone and she's like, well, what are your goals? And I was like, well, I want to be a top teacher. I mean, I think everybody kind of says that at first, but she could tell that I really meant it. And she said, well, you've got to learn how to set goals. You got to figure out your strengths and weaknesses and start to work on your weaknesses. And then right away, I knew that if I was going to be doing videos this was before really, the videos came out and, being on TV and this and that, or doing podcasts or doing presentations in front of large groups, you're going to have to learn how to present. And so I went to work on that. It took me a long time to get comfortable being in front of people, but it also helped me to develop my personality. And doing golf schools and doing groups a lot, that you have to, or you're gonna fail. You're gonna sink really quickly if you're doing a 32 person golf school. And I mean, I remember she used to always call you up in front of the group when you didn't even know it and say, hey, do a presentation on swing plane or do a presentation on chipping or something, and just put you on the spot. I mean, you better get quick, or you're gonna be embarrassed. So I can thank her for a lot of that. And then just the biggest thing was her as my boss just allowed me to be creative in my own skin and seek out other information from other coaches and bring it back to the group. And, you know, it wasn't like we had a strict philosophy. It was like, all right, how do we all get better? And she just saw the passion in me that I was a continuous learner. And, you know, she taught me the importance of reading back in the day. We used to have book club. I mean, we used to have a lot of stuff. So I can thank her for a ton of stuff that maybe not even related to learning the golf swing. Like that was just part of our job anyways. If you were hungry enough and you wanted to be good at your job, you're going to do that. It was just the personal development stuff. I think that she had a bigger influence on me.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the, let's call it the softer values, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they start out, I want to become a golf instructor. That means that they want to know the intricacies of the golf swing and how everything works and what makes the ball do this and all these things. And then there's this completely other side of basically communicating and being able to, well, polish up your communication so well that you leave out all the noise, get to the point, say it in the way the student understands, or show it in the way the student understands, which is, it's probably more important actually than just giving out the correct information.
For sure. Yeah, the EQ stuff is, I think, vital.
Yeah, and that's, I was about to say, I think I learned that the hard way, like probably most other coaches, that you figured, you know what, if the swing is correct, then this is going to work. And just finding out that actually communication is like a really, really big factor in this, and like body language with students and recognizing when you say something and they like the way their eyes look, like they didn't understand what I said, but they're nodding their head because they're
Right.
trying to be polite.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even though what you said is completely correct, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah. We feel great about ourselves and then nothing happens. We wonder why.
Exactly, right? And that's
Yeah.
where the whole self-evaluation process comes in, and actually figuring out like how, because it's pretty much on the coach. I say it all the time, right? It's the coach that's responsible for giving out the good golf lesson. And can't just, if it didn't go right, you can't just go, I was a bad student. You got to go like, what am I missing? Or what did I say? Or was it the wrong order? Or was it the wrong info? Was it too much? Was it not enough?
Yeah, I think we put it on ourselves, because I think that's, if you're tough on yourself, and I always tell the guys that work for me, this is like, if it bothers you when things don't go well, it just means you care. Now, obviously, you have to have a willing participant. A lot of times I think sometimes the person is just, is what I call an upside down cup. For whatever reason, they want to come in and pay you for, them giving you a golf lesson. We have those. But for the most part, we've got to always take a deeper look into ourselves to figure out what we could have done better. But yeah, you definitely have to it's a two-way street. You gotta have a decent student. And most of them are, but you do have those rare occasions that there's not anything you could have done to get through.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is it's probably a good sign if you as a coach, if you're bothered by a lesson afterwards and it didn't go the way you went.
Yep, 100%.
And probably even the best golf lessons you've ever given, if you can find stuff where you go, you know what, this could have been better, this could have been sharper, then you will probably become pretty good at helping others play golf.
Definitely.
What are, so now we went from Dana Radar, have you been to over under 100 seminars in your life?
I would say over 100, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say you're thinking about it, so it's got to be at least over, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What are, if you think about it, I know this is could be a tough question, but are there any of the seminars or shadowing of other coaches or conversations with other coaches that completely changed your teaching paradigm that you can think of off the top of your head, where you went like, whoa, that completely blew my mind?
That's a great question. I mean, it's funny, in the last year and a half, I've done three different certifications. I've done James Rudyard's, the wedge matrix, which is a buddy of mine that I've spent a lot of time with, which I'm fortunate. Again, surrounding yourself with really smart people. That's probably been one of the biggest influences, just changing the short game part of my teaching. The Scott Cokes, just had him in not long ago, and that was phenomenal. As far as just a lot of it's, at this point in my career, it's confirming that some of the things that I figured out that worked with my students, it's more of a deep dive into, like, now I know why. It's like before, it's like I just know this drill works, or I know this works because I can see it changing ball flight or what I want to see in the pattern. Scott's information is fantastic. Looking back, and then Tyler Farrell's, it was an online certification, was really good. It was more into the 3D and the sort of drill layering, and his stuff is great. I'm really interested in that's sort of one of my, I guess, goals in the next year or so, is to get better at reading 3D and understanding that kind of stuff. But looking back, I mean, if I just think back again, it's like things that hit you at a certain time in your career, and now you look back, because I've been teaching for so long, are just a life changing, or just changing the thinking of the way I taught at that time, and things that I've sort of had stick with me. There was really two, I'd say. When Jim Hardy came out with the 1-plane, 2-plane stuff in like 2004, I remember watching him at the National Teaching Summit when they used to have it outside down at Port St. Lucie. That was the first time anybody's ever done that. Again, like, we look back at it now, and you might think it's archaic or whatever, but at the time that was groundbreaking and stuff. I thought that was fantastic. And obviously he continues to put out good stuff. And then I never actually went to a stack and tilt seminar, but I had videos, and I'd spent time around Mike and Andy, and then people like James Rudyard was one of the original guys that worked with them. So once I started understanding the pieces and the stuff that they were doing, I thought that was very, very instrumental, and has had a huge impact on the framework that I work on now. From those people out there that know my philosophy, I wouldn't say, you can say philosophy or framework, it's just the mastermind skills, but low point control is number one, right? I mean, I got that from Mike and Andy, hitting the ground in the right place. I mean, how to develop a centered pivot, just different little ideas that just stick with you, and you start to evolve, and then you start to look at different things. Had a huge impact on me. And I think that's where we're at. The longer you teach, you just start to have those kind of moments. And then you look back and say, well, maybe this isn't what I need to be doing now, but at the time it was huge. And you just gather little bits and pieces from everybody that you come in contact with, or everything that you read, and everybody that you spend time with or observe teaching, like you said. That sort of helps develop your style and your so-called philosophy. But those were two probably that's been, 10 to 15 years ago, that were huge for me, and that sort of helped develop, some of the information that I have now.
Yeah, and when I think about it, that's probably Jim Hardy and Mike and Andy are probably the founders of this big thing we keep reading about now called matchups, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly.
Making things match up. All right.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this one way. If this happens, then this has to happen. Or
right.
If this happens, this has to happen. I think James, short game wise, was really good at that, getting different things to work.
Yeah. And it's
I'm
the same.
actually-
It's the same with him. I mean, if you're spending time with him, it's not. There's not one way. It's just understanding. Like you can call them matchups, or you can call them, whatever you want. But this has to happen for this to work, or this piece has to work with this other piece. It's just a puzzle. It's just like we always talk about. With putting, and me and John talk about all the time. It's just things have to sort of go together. If not, then it's a scattered mess. But having as much information as you can, and again, that's just digging in there and doing it, having that knowledge, but also being able to deliver it, and then watch the reaction or the outcomes of what happens, regardless if it's a full swing, short game, or a putting lesson. Again, it's just paying attention.
Yeah, it's I've spent probably 5 days with James, I think, total this far.
Nice.
And I'm actually attending his Wedge Works seminar in 10 days in Denmark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to his first short game secret seminar where we had him for 3 days. It was mind-blowingly good, and I look forward to the next one as well. I think James is one of the smarter guys in the industry, without a doubt.
Yep.
Actually, like when I think about it, I actually spent 2 days with Scott Couch 2 years ago, and spent probably 5 or 6 days with Tyler Farrell.
There you go.
Who doesn't eat anything whatsoever. I took him out to eat, I don't know, a couple of times, and it's so freaking boring. All he eats is chicken and lettuce.
That's how he stays so skinny.
If he doesn't eat chicken and lettuce, his toes start to hurt or something. But he'll make you feel pretty dumb when he starts going into stuff. At least, like, and not in a bad way. Like,
I get it.
Wow, there's all these things that I don't know anything about.
Oh, that's
but
funny.
It's to the people listening, at least to the young instructors listening, or the younger. It doesn't even have to be younger instructors. Like all the people that Jason just recommended are all worth looking into, and if it's possible, attend their seminars, because it's without a doubt things that will make you a better instructor. None of this will make you worse. It will all make you better. What about books, Jason? You said Dana Rader taught you or helped you read more. Are there any books where you go like, this was instrumental in my teaching career?
Wow, I'm sitting in my office looking at my bookshelf, and there's hundreds. And I think the interesting thing, and we could go, teaching, or we could go personal development, or just outside of golf. I was always interested in reading stuff outside of golf that had to do with, leadership, or, self-growth, or marketing, or branding, and stuff like that sort of pushed me in a lot of positive directions. But going back to the comment I made earlier about me being sort of a shy, backward, very quiet golf professional, young assistant that had trouble holding conversations, is that once I figured out I needed to fix that. One of the first books that I read was by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's kind of a legendary book that just talked about having the ways of showing interest in others rather than worrying about yourself. So that was a big lesson learned. And then coming up, one of my favorite books that I always like to mention is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It was written in like 1937, and he was sort of the father of personal growth. That if you dig into any of the sort of experts out there like Tony Robbins or Jim Rohn or Brian Tracy or some of these Zig Ziglar, they always come back to Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, because I think a lot of the ideas like affirmations and That's where I got the idea of my mastermind crew that he mentions in the book, which is, who do you surround yourself with, right? Do you surround yourself with like-minded people with similar goals that are going to hold you accountable and push you to be better? That's kind of where I got that. So that's a good really old book. But now I think, and we could go through hundreds, obviously, with books from, I actually had a list here because I knew that was going to come up. Let's see, because you forget half of them, right?
Yep.
Let's see. Some of my favorites. Because, when I started at Dana's was about the time that CDs started becoming popular. We could actually burn CDs off the internet for that's highly illegal now. But I used to listen to hours and hours of programs like Tony Robbins or Jim Rohn is probably one of my favorites. Just seminars that were very influential in my life, but also just in how I present at workshops. I mean, I used to listen to more just how they delivered the information, as well as the information I think is important. But The Servant Leader by James Autry was a big one. Anything by John Maxwell, I highly recommend. One of my favorites is called Failing Forward, Thinking for a Change, the 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader, The Success Journey. Anything from the 101 series is really, really good. So there's a lot of sort of obscure books out there that probably nobody's heard. There's one called Shackleton's Way, which is a great leadership book that was about a great Antarctic explorer, and it talked about how he managed his crew and how he basically matched up certain personality types that have a continuous learning gene is really, it's so important that we learn these little things, and you can find them in a lot of different books that are outside of golf. I remember we used to always have teachers come to watch us teach or come to watch Dana teach, and she would always kind of send them my way to say, hey, go talk to Jason and ask him how many books outside of golf he's read. And it's like they were amazed because, when you get in as an instructor, now it's, a lot of the young instructors don't read as much. They'll go watch videos online or they'll listen to podcasts, which is great. But back in, the mid 90s, early 2000s, it's like we just read because that's kind of what we did. So I think I love reading coaching books like John Wooden, Dean Smith, Coach K, anything outside, just top coaches have a similar way that they get the most out of their players that you can learn from. So I think there's just so many. I could keep going. Let's see, Power of Who by Bob Bodine was really good. How Full Is Your Bucket? It's by Tom Rath and Donald Clifton. And then one of the classics out there is The Power of Positive Thinking, obviously by Norman Vincent Peale. Everybody's heard of that one. But then as far as branding goes, and everybody's heard me talk about this on the podcast, but Gary Vaynerchuk has been a huge influence on me. When I first read his book, Crush It, years ago, I think it was probably 2008, 2009, right when social media started getting popular, Twitter started getting popular. He had a YouTube show called Wine Library TV where he basically talked about wine, and he broke out basically just a blueprint of how to market yourself online. And that's where I started a YouTube show called Guru TV in 2009 and did hundreds of videos, and then started, Twitter and Facebook, and then obviously now it's Instagram. But he's written 4 or 5 books now, I think. The Thank You Economy was really good. And he just came out with his newest one called Crushing It, which is kind of the updated version of Crush It, which now just talks about, the new social media platforms that are out there now. So it's just, there's so many you can learn from. And he's got a great podcast as well. I don't know. I've tried to get him on the show at some point, but I think he's too expensive.
Yeah, he's too big of a deal.
He's a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's pretty well known. And again, he has nothing to do with, probably couldn't even tell you which end of the golf club to hold it on. But he's had a massive influence on my life, and I listen to his podcast all the time just to kind of keep updated with what's going on out there in the social world, and then how I can better communicate with my customers, my clients, and then build relationships, which has been massive for me. Most of the people that are some of my best friends nowadays I've met through social media.
Yeah, I think that's the really, really cool part, right? It's the social media part. It's just made the coaching world so much smaller for guys who actually want to share information and want to improve each other and want to question each other.
For sure.
Because it seems like, Twitter used to be really good. It seems like is it kind of on the decline?
Yeah,
I don't know if it is. You know better than me.
Yeah, it's definitely on the decline. It's Instagram's taken over. Facebook's still.
Yes, there was this period. There was this period in the Facebook groups, right? The golf teaching professionals and biomechanists and stuff, where it was thriving, and it seems like a lot of the people that would contribute, they're not really contributing anymore either. Yeah. And it basically turns into Instagram, and then it turns into people basically DMing each other instead.
Yeah,
or having Skype calls, or having FaceTime calls instead, which is, I don't know. I think that's a shame, because I actually thought that you almost have to be lucky to have been a part of that and have been able to read all that and being able to get in contact with a lot of coaches.
Yeah, it's still there. You can. I get DMs on the daily, with people trying to connect and, come to watch me teach or to have questions or whatever, and it's great. I think it just makes the learning curve that much quicker for the coaches out there that are seeking information or trying to get better. I would have loved to had social media when I was in my 20s. I would have been. I'd be a lot better than I am now, probably.
It seems like it speeds things up.
Absolutely.
At least.
Yep.
What do you do when coach contacts you? He wants to come watch you teach. Do you just let him in, or do you what do you do?
Charge him like $600 an hour. I'm kidding. I don't charge him anything. Yeah, that's my buddy Joe Mayo that does that. Yeah, so I know that was a good pause, wasn't it? No, I just let him come. Yeah, I think I find it flattering, for one, that anybody would actually want to come learn from me, and two, it's an honor that they would think that they could come and learn something, and I'm happy to share anything that I've picked up along the way, because I think that's our job, is to pass it on and help everybody else in the industry get better, because that's what happened to me. I had plenty of people that have been very gracious to me to share any and answer my questions and pick up the phone when I call, and I'm happy to do that for anybody now. But yeah, I just say, hey, as long as the students are cool, which most of my students, I've never had anybody say no, nobody can watch, but I always check with the student first, and they're okay with it. I think they think it's kind of cool. Hey, my coach has actually got somebody that thinks enough of them to come and watch our lesson. I think they feel pretty good about it. And I say, yeah, come on and be on time. Don't get in my teaching bubble, which I'll show them where I'm going to be walking around, where I'm going to be standing, and don't say anything until after the lesson. And I usually try to spend some time with them afterwards and answer their questions and go through anything that they had questions about as far as the lessons go. And I try to include them a little bit, depending on the student. I will bring them into the lesson a little bit and ask them, hey, what do you think? Or this is why I did this. It just depends on the player I'm working with, but I try to make that experience for them as great as I can, because usually they come from a pretty great distance to see me, so I want to make sure that I make it worth their trip.
Yeah, honestly, that's got to be the only way to do it. Not that anybody asked for my opinion on. If somebody asks you to, they can come watch you teach. Say yes pretty much anytime as long as the student's cool with it.
Yeah.
Don't charge them money. It's usually young, ambitious coaches who want to improve, and they probably don't have a lot of money to start with.
True.
What? So you have two assistants at the moment. You have Robbie and Seth, right?
Correct.
What? And how much longer do you have them as your assistants? Do you know?
As long as they want to be there.
As long as they want to be there.
Yeah.
What do you hope when they leave your academy? Let's just say at one time they move on to something bigger, which they more than likely will at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
They're more than likely they'll actually sit and they'll end up close to the top of the teaching world in time.
Yes.
Right? They're freaking smart guys, and they take their job serious, and they try to learn more. What do you hope? So I asked you in the beginning, what did you take away from Dana Radar?
Mm-hmm.
What do you, looking back on that, what do you hope that they leave Carmel Country Club with?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, you probably have to ask them afterwards, I guess, to see whether it came through. But, I would hope that they would take away some of the things that we've already talked about, which is that I care and I'm passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about the game and really when I say the game, it's not just the game of golf, it's the teaching game, the instruction game that we're in charge of right now, and how much work that I've put in to get to where I am right now, that it takes a ton of work, that it's not handed to you. I would hope that all the conversations and the training, and because I treat my training sessions, and they'll tell you this, it's not me talking down to them saying, hey, this is the way we have to do it, or this is the right way. It's more about us just having a conversation and learning from each other. Because what I love about my guys, Robbie and Seth, is they're out getting advice and getting help from other top coaches. And they bring that information back, and then we have a discussion, and we all learn from each other. So I would hope that they would say that it was a environment that I created for them to be the best coach and the best person that they can be. That would probably be the biggest compliment, because so far I think I'm 100% with all the people that have worked for me have all went on to have director of instruction jobs. I think I'm like 7 for 7. So right now, these guys are going to be no different, and they're already superstars. So they're going to have, I think, their pick of jobs here very shortly. And it's not just because of me, it's just because hopefully I've created that opportunity for them to get better. And it's kind of up to them to go seek out all the information that I don't have. Because again, I don't know it all. I'm still learning right along with them. But all I can do is I've shared with them what I've been through, how I've gotten to where I am today, and hopefully they're gonna take away and say, hey, that guy cared about me as a person, and also as a professional, because that's what it's all about for me, is leaving that legacy of, I had an effect on the guys that work for me in a positive way, and then I require them to go do the same thing, which is pass it on to others that are going to come underneath them, because that's the evolution of really what I'm trying to create.
That's a pretty good record. 7 out of 7.
Just lucky. I got nothing. I don't know what I'm doing. I just
maybe you have a hunch. What do you think are some of the because we like a lot of the because I mean, it's got to be a lot of the sharing going on has to also be about, let's say, what rabbit holes not to go down when your assistants, they start researching stuff, and there's some things we go like, yeah, you should probably know that's not gonna. I've already done that. You don't have to make that mistake. I know we learn from our mistakes, but there's no point in spending the next 2 years going down this rabbit hole because it's going to end up in a bad spot. What are some of the things, if you should make, if we could call it bad recommendations, are there any where you go like, I feel like I hear this a lot and I'm not sure this is very good advice?
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if it can be specific without pissing anybody off out there.
No, sorry.
You know, that's a tough one. Yeah, but I would say research everything that you hear. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, and there's, without getting too specific, I mean, if you're paying attention, you're smart enough. And again, if I've taught my guys anything, is the people that I've surrounded myself with come with facts, like Tyler Farrell, like John Sinclair, you know, like Dr. Rob Neal, like these guys that are doing the 3D stuff. That's and what's actually happening. Like there's very little discussion of, okay, that's not true. That's what I tell them. I mean, like, and test it. You know, if test what you're teaching. Take the other side. I think, you know, that's a big lesson learned. We've heard several people talk about on the podcast, like, you know, John Graham and, you know, guys like Chris Como, that, you know, don't judge something until you fully know the ins and outs of it. And you probably heard one of my earlier podcasts with James talking about Stack and Tilt was a perfect example. When it first came out and they had the pictures in the Golf Digest, without knowing the ins and outs of it, it was easy to judge, oh, well, that's not going to work. Well, see, and that's a very shallow, closed-minded view of something that obviously is very successful. So I always just try to get people to make sure that you do your research, do your homework before you start, you know, saying something is wrong or something is stupid. Also, I'd say, you know, just, you know, I always talk to my guys. It's like, you know, surround yourself with people that are going to make you better. Yeah, because there's a lot of people out there that might not have your best interest at heart. Because that's just the way the world works, you know. So it's just have that filter of knowing that, and it's tough as a young guy. You don't know. You don't know until maybe something bad happens. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it's again, it's difficult. You know, it's difficult as a young guy getting into the business to know, because as I always say, you don't know what you don't know.
No.
Right. So a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is failing. But again, it's like mistakes are okay. Just don't make it again. Don't keep making the same mistake twice or three times. But making mistakes is part of the deal, whether it's life or teaching golf, right? It's just, but pay attention and be observant enough to go, all right, well, that didn't work. Let's not do that again. It's just that sort. If you just operate in that kind of mindset on the daily, then typically your path will lead you in the right direction.
Yeah. And there's I was waiting for you to say one, but I'm thinking you agree. Don't start teaching golf for the money.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother subject, but it's like, if that's the reason why you got into golf instruction, then you're in the wrong place.
Yeah. You're going to burn out.
Yeah. Cause we always get that question. It's like, all right, what do we do? You know, if as a young instructor, what advice? I'm like, go teach for free. Go find somewhere to teach. Yeah. I've heard that 100 times on this show and on many shows from smart coaches, is because it's very difficult. I mean, Robbie and Seth will tell you how fortunate they are that I've given them an opportunity to teach at a young age, but they earned it because they get it, because those kids will teach for free. It wasn't about the money. It was about the experience. It was about the learning, because trust me, those two are going to make millions of dollars over their lifetime if they keep doing the right things, right? So yeah, you can't go at it from that standpoint. You can't look at it from a monetary value that quickly. You got to look at it from experience and how am I going to learn, and how am I, because again, you can't get better without actually teaching. You can have all the best information. You can memorize, any of the books and the philosophies out there, but delivering it just comes one way. And that's just getting in there and doing it and sucking and failing and then doing it again and getting better and, figuring it out. So that's a great point that I think the listeners need to have out there, especially if you're getting that question or you're a young coach getting into the game. The teaching game is not for everybody. It's not easy, especially if you want to do it at a high level. It's very, very difficult. But it's very rewarding when you get to where that level of success and you start getting proficient enough to start helping people. There's nothing like it.
No, it's awesome. Yeah. And it's I think, and it's not to say that it don't do it for the money, but the money it's like the goal can't be the money. The goal's got to be about continual development, right? It's got to be about serving others, helping other people, make people better, do all these things. And if you're really, really passionate about that, if you're really passionate about improving to be able to do those things better, like there's an order, right? By the end of the day, you will end up making some money.
Oh, the money will come. Yeah, I always remember Zig Ziglar had a great quote. He says, always, maybe in Jim Rohn actually, he said, always work harder than what you're getting paid and you'll never have to find a job.
That makes total sense.
The money will come if you have that mindset. But it's the problem is, and I was right there in my late 20s when I was miserable, doing the head pro thing or whatever. I was complaining that I wasn't getting paid what I was worth. Well, I wasn't doing the job that I was getting paid. I didn't have that mindset until I figured out that I got to do a lot more than what I'm getting paid instead of complaining about it. Then everything else takes care of itself. It's such a reverse or sort of an inverse dynamic of ego or non-ego that makes people successful.
Yeah, it's basically like you hear all the golfers on TV, right? It's the process.
Yeah, 100%.
Just the process, and then all of a sudden the results show up and all these things.
Yeah. Trust the process. Do the little things that other people don't want to do and want to complain about, and then everything else will work out.
Yep. All right, so we got to go all the way back. You had a change in general managers at the first place where you were director of instruction, right? Yeah. So the question, which is the same question you ask pretty much every podcast, but how has a failure or roadblock in your life set you up for later success? And do you have a favorite one? I'm hoping it's one of those.
Yeah, it's that's definitely it. Yeah, like I said, I was a young head professional. I was in a situation where it was not your normal club. It was what they call an ownership club. There wasn't a board of directors. It was just a single owner club, and he owned a club in Ohio as well. And we had the general manager that hired me as an assistant left and took another job. So then he brought another general manager in that I don't think really, it was more of a food and beverage guy. He wasn't a golf professional. So he really didn't understand that side of the business. And I think he only lasted maybe a year. And then they brought another guy in, kind of the same deal. It was like a manager, a food and beverage manager. And he had already had ideas of like, I want to bring in my staff from the other club or from, people that he knew. So basically got a severance out. And at the time I was like, this sucks. I can't believe, this is happening, blah, blah, blah. But now looking back at it, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Because again, I was teaching a decent amount when I was an assistant. Once I got to be a head professional, I taught very little because I had so much other extra responsibility put on me that I was barely teaching at all. So it was taking me away from really what made me happy, which was teaching and dealing with the people. So it forced me to take a closer look at, what I was really excited to do. So I said, all right, I got to find somewhere that I can teach a lot. And, Dana Rader Golf School was in the area. I started researching like, well, who's the closest top 100 teacher? And I went, and it was funny that how people are put in your path just at the right time. I remember when I was at Northstone before this all happened, there was a satellite golf school there called the Ritz and Soul Golf School. It was just a little one teacher that would bring in like 4 students from all over the world or whatever, and they'd have a little golf school. So I ended up, in my spare time, I would go up and watch the teacher that was involved. Her name was Jennifer Shillington. She's out there. I haven't seen her in years. I owe her a big thank you. And she kept telling me, she's like, dude, you're miserable. Like, what are you doing? Like, you need to be, like, she tried to hire me. She's like, we got an opening. You need to come work for it. I was scared though, right? I had a family, I had young kids, just had my first child. I had a job, I was like, I'm just too scared to take that risk. And she ended up going to work for Dana Rader. And she actually got my foot in the door once I left Northstone. So once I was looking for a teaching job, she's the one that got me the interview, because she said, hey, I know this guy, he's really passionate about teaching. I think he'd be great. So she got me the opportunity to get face-to-face with Dana, and somehow I made it through the interview process. It was pretty brutal. We always had to give lessons, and it's funny, after you get on staff, you get involved with it for the hiring part, but it was a pretty extensive interview process. You have to give lessons in front of the group, which is super nerve-wracking. So I somehow, she saw something in me, thankful for that, and that's how I did it. But if it wouldn't have been for me failing as a head professional, I probably would not be where I'm at today. I'd probably still be bouncing around to different clubs, doing what I really didn't want to do. So I think I always say that's one of the best things that ever happened to me, for sure.
Yes, that's a pretty lucky set of circumstances at an early age, or at least in the early part of your career, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, again, it just shows you how important it is to build relationships. If I wouldn't have befriended Jennifer, then she goes to Dana's, and then I go to Dana's because she gets me in. Like, it just the way things happen, but you just never know the people you meet who can be that help to you. That's why my dad told me that a long time ago. He's like, when you're in the service business like we are, it's like, you better be nice to everybody, because you never know who's going to be your next boss.
No, that's right. And it's still like, I'd say on the other hand, I'm also a firm believer that you create your own luck. So, I mean, that's kind of part of creating your own luck, isn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Having a good network of people, be nice to people so you actually can get a recommendation. If you know there's a job opening, if you know that there's a certain place you want to be later on in your life, you still have a pretty massive influence on that if you do your best, if you continue to educate yourself, if you continue to surround yourself with the correct people. And of course, you're nice to people, because it doesn't take long to get a really bad rap on the other hand, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think somebody said, I hear this come up a lot, is you're an average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty big believer in that. I think that's important. Or an old West Virginia saying is, you are who you run with.
Yeah.
Even though you may
Makes
not
sense.
agree with some of the things the people you hang out with, sometimes guilt by association can be a bad deal as well.
Yeah, that's right. What is so we're gonna do some quick ones right here in the end, okay?
All right, yep.
What are I like this question. You don't get to ask that a whole lot, but I actually like the one that so the question sounds, I think as continuous learners, it is important to always stay in the beginner's mindset. So when's the last time you learned something new?
Yeah, I love that question too. And for me,
What's a beginner at something?
yeah, for me, it was podcasting. It was interviewing.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think about that a lot, because when I started the podcast, and I'm glad you said that because I always like to share sort of what I've learned as I started the show. Because again, it started on a whim, and there was a guy that works at the club that used to be in the music business and is recently now as a producer, like a music producer, and he's the one that kind of gave me the idea because he sort of followed me online and stuff, and he said, "Man, you ought to do a podcast." I'm like, "Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I said, "Man, I don't know if I could ever do that." And he said, "Yeah, you could." So I literally just jumped in feet first, not knowing anything about it. So then it led me down that road of lots of YouTube videos, lots of emails to I started befriending producers on shows that I liked, that I listened to, and just try to figure it all out. But it's, as you're finding out right now, is the interviewing is a skill. And being prepared and doing, now I enjoy doing the research on the guests that I have. But it's really helped me to learn to ask better questions or learn to phrase questions in a certain way, which obviously we do every day on the coach in the coaching tee. So it's funny that as soon as I meet somebody new, now I sort of jump right into interview mode for out of nowhere and start to just dig in, and because I'm curious about them, right? I'm really interested. So that's been the thing, and the big skill really, because I do this all myself, is now I know how to edit. I know how to mix. I know how to do all this, all the behind the scenes stuff to make and create the podcast, which was not easy starting out. I had no idea what, what microphones to buy and what equipment that I need, and then what software did I need to do the editing and all that stuff. So that's been a skill that I've learned to develop and trying to get better at interviewing. So it's kind of like what I talked about before when I talked about Automobile University, when I used to listen to all the CDs back in the day in the car to and from work. Now it's podcasts. I really pay attention, whether it's on TV or different podcasts, to how the interviewers treat the guests, how they ask questions, how they create the flow to the show, all these things that I'm trying to get better at, and still got a long way to go. I don't think I'm that great at it, but I think I've gotten better. If you listen from the first couple episodes to now, hopefully you can see, start to hear some improvement. But that's probably been the biggest skill that's taken up a lot of my time, but I love it. I mean, I always say you're doing something right when something keeps you up late at night or gets you out of bed early and you don't make any money at it. which is the show.
You're right.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know. I mean, but I enjoy it, and and people seem to like the show. So I'm going to keep doing it and just kind of see where it goes. But I think it's had a nice influence and a big effect on my coaching and teaching as well.
It's harder than it sounds being an interviewer.
Definitely.
I just realized today.
You're doing great.
I don't recall the last time I sat down in a chair and just started sweating.
That's it. Every time I do it, I get nervous.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. All right, so we got the final two questions, Jason.
All right.
These are two of my favorite ones too. When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, or you lost your focus temporarily, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because you're a busy man.
Yeah, and there's two things. One, I'm just starting to do, but the thing that I guess sort of my stress relief is running and working out. I started, guess it was got to be almost 15 years ago. I met one of my good friends now, a guy named Steve Hightower. He took one of my beginning men's golf schools, and this was me, like I said, I was 30, 34, I guess. And, ex-athletes are always kind of trying to figure out how to stay in shape or how to do, you just want to feel like an athlete again as you get older. And I remember him coming in, and he had a triathlon or like an Ironman visor on. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's a big triathlon. And I'm like, wow, it's like, that's crazy. Like, you got to run a marathon and you got to swim and bike. And it's like, I could never do that. And I told him, I was like, I just started running again. Because I'd always start running, but I had no idea like how to properly build a running program. I would just, like everybody else, I'd get out and go run 3 miles as fast as I could. And the next day I'd be so sore I couldn't get out of bed, and I'd quit. Right. So, and he goes, oh no, you gotta like understand how to do it, how to approach it. So that really piqued my curiosity, because it's just how I've approached everything else that I've learned, like golf instruction is like, what do you do? Well, you go find a video, you go read a book or something. So he gave me some stuff to read. He gave me Jeff Galloway has a really good run walk program that's kind of famous out there. And he's like, you need to, and he sent me this program. He's like, I'll have you run 30 minutes or 3 miles in so much time and it won't hurt. And I'm like, that's crazy. So I started doing it the right way, started building the muscles slowly. And he goes, next thing you do, you got to sign up for a race. So I signed up for a 10K. So that really gets your competitive juices going, because you're like, this guy beside me is like not going to beat me. It's like you're running. So I was,
Yep.
So then I was hooked. I ran a 10K. So me being like super OCD Jason, I talked to him. He's like, well, now you got to do a marathon. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, I never do a marathon. I'm like, my body type. You have this sort of vision of like, oh, marathoners are like super skinny and tall and lanky or whatever. He goes, no, you trust me. Look at me. Like, this guy's built just like me. He's kind of broad, husky guy. And he goes, I could train you to do it. So 2006, we started running together, and I ran my first marathon in Chicago, and I was completely hooked. And so I've run 2 3/4 marathons. One I almost died in. That's a story for another time. Literally almost died. No joke. And I've run half a dozen half marathons, and I've never stopped. Like, I mean, you have ebbs and flows, obviously. Like right now I'm running 20, 25 miles a week, which is nothing for a marathoner, but just to stay in shape. But that's sort of my getaway. Like, it's almost spiritual for me, like to get out and put some headphones on and just go and, run 6-8 miles or whatever it's just a great way. Plus, it just releases some endorphins and all that stuff that comes with it. So that's always been sort of a go-to for me. And now I've started to, with a lot of the recommendations, we listen to these podcasts, we read these books, successful people do certain things. You're like, wow, I'm not doing that. It's usually exercise so much. And then meditation keeps coming up. I'm like, gosh, I need something to quiet this monkey brain of mine that will not stop and won't let me sleep. So I've been starting to dabble in meditation with the help of my my buddy John Hardesty that I just had on the podcast not long ago. So he's kind of guiding me through it a little bit. So that's been interesting. So I'm kind of dabbling in that. But typically when I get overwhelmed or unfocused, it's because I've procrastinated with details or projects that I need to do, like getting ready for a speech or a talk or something I need to get done. And I just wait too long and I end up cramming it in at the last minute. That's when I usually get stressed. But overall, I mean, gosh, I'm so fortunate. I mean, I got such a great job and I got such a really good life. Most of the stuff because I'm a worrier, I usually worry about stuff that I don't need to be worrying about. My wife and my kids usually tell me that, you need to stop and chill out. But that's, those are two kind of my go-tos. But running is, I'll always, as long as I can put one foot in front of the other, I'm always going to be a runner because I love it. I'm not very fast anymore, but it doesn't matter. I can run pretty far, but just slow and steady.
I'm jealous. I wish I enjoyed running. There's nothing in this world I dislike more than running.
Oh, I said the same thing. I'm telling you, it's just once you get to a level where it's not work, and you feel your cardio is where, you're not gasping for air. It's actually pretty enjoyable, especially when you do it with other people. I have a group of people that I run with once a week. We do long runs, and that's been a whole nother, like Steve Hightower is my boy. That's been a whole nother community of people that has been a blessing in my life because they don't care about golf. Like we just talk about everything else, because when you're running 15 miles, it's pretty boring unless you got somebody to talk to. So it's like that's been such a huge part of my life. But yeah, it's a good escape for me. Definitely, get away from whatever's bugging me.
I like it. Last one, Jason. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say? Just your message to whatever.
All right. My favorite quote, and I always use this in my talks, my workshop talks, is a quote from Zig Ziglar, God rest his soul. If you can help enough other people get what they want, you can have everything you want if you're interested. So it goes right back to that mantra that I always use at the end of the podcast is study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. So it's something that I try to live by, is basically try to make everybody around you better by sharing and caring.
That's pretty good.
That's me.
I like it. Jason, I think that went on for quite a while, but it went by fast in my opinion. I had a blast talking to you. I thought it was fun. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was really, really fun to listen to the interviewer on the other side of the mic, and that's why I offered up to do this, because I've been a huge fan of your podcasts. I think they've been great. I listen to them in my car. I'll listen to them, like I said, when I pick the range. I'll listen to it at whatever time. Sometimes if my wife makes me clean the house, I'll put on the headphones and I'll listen to Jason Sutton's Golf Guru podcast, and all of a sudden it's not that bad of a chore anyways.
Thanks, buddy.
And I think it was, I think this went pretty well.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, and thanks for offering to take over the show. And I think you did a fantastic job as the interviewer, and hopefully everybody will listen to this and support this one just as much as they've supported the rest of them, which has been really fantastic and something that I didn't expect.
I think they will. I think this was really interesting. I really enjoyed it.
So you gotta wrap it up. So how are you gonna close the show?
Shit, I don't know. What do I say?
Any parting words from the host?
This is when the beat in the background starts going and everything.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you go. First, big thank you to my friend Andreas Callie for hosting the show, hijacking the Golf Guru show. That was cool. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Got a little more insight into my career. If you want to follow, and I think you must follow Andreas, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at Andreas Callie. That's Kali Golf. And you won't be disappointed. He's a fantastic coach. And you want to go back and listen to his podcast when he was the guest on episode 25. So check him out. Thank you for subscribing to the podcast. Make sure you download the episodes. That is very important to creating the numbers that we need to keep this podcast going. If you have any questions about the show, feel free to email me at the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com, or just hit me up on the DM. My handle on Instagram and the Twitter is Golf Guru TV. So give me a follow and hit me up. I want to hear from you. That would be awesome. Also, what else? Leave me an iTunes review. Give me a 5-star rating. That would be cool. That would be rad. That would be awesome. And as I leave you with the infamous Jim Rohn quote, study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening.